Good evening. Welcome to the BS and Beer Show. Tonight's topic, in case it's not obvious, is Fine Homebuilding's 40th anniversary celebration, a look back at the industry and the magazine. So we've invited a bunch of really great guests who have contributed to the magazine over the years, both new and long-term, to join us tonight. And this is just a highlight of a few people. Obviously, there have been lots of great contributors over the year. I'm Emily Mottram. I'm architect here in Maine, still having some sparkling white wine because the beer is still empty because I did not go to the grocery store this week. It's my least favorite place, but yeah. BS and Beer is an independent grassroots movement. We are all volunteers here to share building science knowledge. It's based on our local meetup groups. And so we hope that the discussions are fun and informative. We want to thank Green Building Advisor and Fine Homebuilding tonight for being our media partners to help us make this happen. And I'll call out Jess just right now. She makes the replay of this show happen every week. So make sure you send out a big thank you to Jess for making that happen every week. We want to thank our audience for tuning in every week and watching the replays. Some of the replays have more than 1,000 views. So thank you to all of you who watch live or who watch the replays. Tonight's agenda, I actually have no idea what the agenda is. It might be introductions, a panel discussion, and audience questions for our Fine Homebuilding guests or otherwise. But if it's not, and that's not how it goes, that's totally fine. So tonight is supposed to be a celebration. Mike, off to you for announcements.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Mike Maines. Tonight I am drinking a Marshall Wharf Below the Belt IPA, local microbrewery. I think I have more of their empty growlers than they do at this point. I'm excited about tonight. I think I probably read my first time Fine Homebuilding in the mid '80s, and it's definitely been a huge influence on my life. So when I started writing for them, it's really been an honor to be involved in the magazine and to have these people here who just have made it happen. Few notes. If anybody's not familiar with Zoom, if there's anybody on the screen, I don't think we have any non-video participants, we'll skip that. Please feel free to comment or ask questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Just open up the chat and there's a whole side conversation there. We'll pull comments and questions as needed if the conversation is not rolling among the panelists. If you do comment, Zoom quirk is be sure to click all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it defaults to just panelists. So we'll see what you say, but nobody else will. So we like to make sure everybody in the audience can see comments and questions. Every week, Fine Homebuilding sends out Zoom reminders, a couple of Zoom reminders each week. If you want more information delivered to your inbox, join our mailing list at thebsandbeershow.com. or check out Kylie's weekly post at Green Building Advisor. The video recording of tonight's show will be available at Green Building Advisor, and we encourage you to continue the conversation over there. All the past shows can be found there and also on YouTube and through a link at thebsandbeershow.com. An audio-only version of tonight's show will be available wherever podcasts are found. And I will turn it over to Travis.
Good evening. I'm Travis Brungard. I'm in Kansas City. I'm drinking a Free State Guavatas sour. Even though it's not in season, it's always a good time for a sour. I've got the events tonight. So let me first talk about Skillsusa. It's an organization dedicated to closing the skills gap. Mean old Bill Robinson's looking for industry professionals willing to help with judging projects across 30 to 40 states one day in June. So if you can help, please reach out to Bill directly at bill@train2build.com and help keep craft alive. We'll put a link to that in the chat. Also, join Mark Willey and Dave Cooper every week for BS Fridays. The BS and Beer Brew Crew will be their guests on February 19th, and there'll be a link to that as well. If you like BS and Beer and you haven't seen it yet, you'll probably like what Passive House Accelerator is doing. So check out what their Construction Tech Tuesday and Wednesday Global Happy Hours are about. Again, link in the chat. And if you haven't listened to Emily's podcast, you were missing out. E3 with Emily. You got to check it out. She's got conversations with all sorts of building professionals in design and throughout the field. Certainly You can find conversations with Jake Bruton, Lloyd Alter, and our own Kylie Jacques had an excellent piece on there. So I would highly recommend the podcast to anyone who cares about this stuff. She does a fantastic job with it. Also, we have to talk about our book club coming up April 1st. Jacob David Recusen's book, Essential Building Science. There's a discount if you want to buy this book and join the book club. It's a 25% off discount. Check it out in the chat. Join us for book club. That's all we got for events. I'll turn it back to Kylie and we can get the party started. Go ahead, Kylie.
Hi, thanks, Travis. I'm super excited you're all here. I was hoping for a full screen, and here it is. I'm Kylie Jacques. I'm the senior editor at Green Building Advisor. But this show is in celebration of Fine Homebuilding, which is where I started as the design editor. Brian was stepping away, and I was hired to fill those shoes, a little big. And I knew that I had landed at a really special place, and it was an enormous opportunity for me that I will forever be grateful for. In fact, Steve Basic, who had a huge hand in putting my resume in front of Justin, told me that very thing when I gave him, the news that I had gotten the job. He said, "You've landed in a special place." And like Patrick, I often feel teary about these things. So I'll move on to say that one of the things that I love about Taunton Publications is the emphasis on the human element. Each one of their magazines is about craft and how people express themselves and find comfort and contribute to the quality of their life. I think that's what makes it a special place. And the people who work there are smart as all get out, and passionate and inspired. And I feel incredible gratitude to be there and among them. And every day is educational. And that's what I love about it. So I thought for tonight, the way that we should do this is for me to call on each of you, and you can tell us a little bit about your affiliation with the magazine and how many years you've been there, or your duration at Taunton, whatever it may be, and then a little bit about like what the magazine means to you, as I just did. I think, and then in addition to that, once we've done that, I'm going to hand it over to Mason Lord, who is responsible. Where are you, Mason? I can barely see the screen here. Okay, hey, this was his idea. He wrote to me and said, I heard on the podcast that we're having the 40th anniversary of Fine Homebuilding, and I think it would be really neat to celebrate that on the BS and Beer show, which Mason attends every single week and has been on a couple of times. So I thought it was a great idea. We ran with it, and he has a visual representation of at least a number of people here. I think it's going to be fun. So let's just start off by, I'm just going to go around the screen in no particular order of the people that I see as I go here. And just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're drinking, and what Fine Homebuilding means to you. So Rob, you're the first person I see. Lay it on us. You're on mute.
I guess you're meaning me and not the other Rob.
Oh yeah, Rob Wotzak. I'm sorry.
Well, it's kind of cool that Mason's a part of this, because I probably wouldn't even be at Fine Homebuilding or if it weren't for him, because I was working for him years ago. It was my first job in construction. And also, when I was working for his company, we would go to JLC Live, and I'd learn a lot about the business and the back end of construction. And that's sort of where I got the sort of chops that I needed to get the job in the first place. And I've been here since 2010, on and off. I actually left for a couple of years, but I never really left, because I don't think anybody at home building ever really leaves. They always seem to stick around in some way or another. But so I've been working on the website there for the past 11 years now. And what I love about it is just the people. I mean, I'm able to work with some of the most dedicated and caring and cooperative and creative people. And I think that comes across in everything that we do, because I think you see the response from a lot of our audience and how much they care about the way we present the information that inspires them to do the great work that they do.
All right, Andy.
Well, I've been reading Fine Homebuilding since there was a Fine Homebuilding. Also, the important thing, I am drinking a Berkshire Brewing Cabin Fever Ale, in part because I like the beer and in part because they sponsor my favorite bike ride, the D2R2. So that's a little nugget about my personality. I read Fine Homebuilding for many, many years. Back when I was a carpenter in New Jersey, we used a lot of vinyl siding, a lot of OSB, a lot of hollow core doors, and I felt pretty lonely sometimes, like I was the only guy who was there because I actually liked doing what I was doing. And when I found Fine Homebuilding, I realized that there was this whole network of other people who gave a damn about construction. And so I became a junkie for some years. And in 1996, I took a shot because Kevin Ireton advertised in the magazine that they were looking for an assistant editor. And much to my surprise, he hired me. He's apologized a couple of times for that over the years, but honestly, it was one of the best moves that I've ever made because, as I said, or as Rob said, or as Kylie said, the people who work at Taunton are smart. They're kind. They care about other people. They care about their craft. When I first came there, I kind of felt like the character in the one Far Side cartoon, School for the Gifted, where the door says pull and the kid is pushing really hard on it. I felt like I was so far out of my element for the first year or so. It was amazing. But I guess it worked out. So I started in 96. I stayed till 2005, left for a while, came back in 2011, stayed for a few years, and now I'm a remodeling contractor and I still read the magazine. I still contribute to the magazine, and most of the people I work with read or contribute to the magazine. Like Rob, I worked for Mason Lord for a time. In fact, counting 5 of the people on this screen were my boss at one point or another on the in my career. So it's been a great ride.
That's great. I love it. Mike Guertin.
Hello, and thank you, Mason, for coming up with this idea. I thought it was fantastic as soon as I saw Kylie's email. I'm drinking water from my well. That's all I ever drink, unless I have to travel. My experiences parallels a little bit of Andy's in that became a reader back in the 1980s. Then in the late 80s, after reading it for several years, A Fine Homebuilding, I had to take issue with some of the articles that the authors would write, the other builders. I say, there's another way, there's a better way, there's a different way. Even though I learned a lot from it, I also used to want to punch back. So my friend Rick Arnold and I were business partners at the time, answered one of the little boxes that was in the magazine. Back then you had to respond with regular mail that went through the postal service. And it said, if you want to write an article, send us a letter and we'll send you the author guidelines. And I got this letter back from Fine Woodworking, and it said, Fine Woodworking author guidelines. And I was like, these idiots, I don't want anything to do with fine woodworking. I'm not that kind of a carpenter. I'm a home builder. So we ignored them and we didn't respond. 5 years later, they called us, which is the way it should have been. Just by happenstance, this is a purely Rhode Island thing. There's only 1 degree of separation from everybody in Rhode Island. And my brother's wife's cousin's husband had worked with a guy who ended up as an editor at Fine Homebuilding, Roe Osborne. And Roe called us up because the fellow that was working with us, Todd, he said, hey, these guys are pretty cool. They seem to really know what they're doing, and you might want to meet them, because we were setting up our company to be sort of an employee-owned business, and incorporated all of their input, all of our workers, in how we were going to do our standard operating procedure, which became our first, I think, 7 or 8 articles that we wrote for the magazine. So boy, and it's only been a wild ride ever since then, and a really fun one. There's only a couple of the real, I mean, Kevin and Scott and I and Andy to some extent can talk about the editors that worked for the magazine going way back, and a lot of those guys were just fun to work with, and even the young kids, Kylie and Justin and Rob. And
I love being called a young kid. I'm almost 50.
I mean, even I remember when meeting Brian for the first time when he was an intern, and it was like,
Right.
Yep, here's a new young guy. And then Kevin saying, oh, we're going to send Brian out for his first photo shoot to go work on one of Mike Guertin's articles, because that way Mike won't let him screw up. Mike's been around long enough that he knows what needs to be photographed. And there were Brian and me and Chuck Bickford up in an attic trying to photograph putting in a ventilation fan. So yeah, it's fun all the way. One of the biggest kicks I get out of being associated with Fine Home Building is meeting contractors, builders, and homeowners from around the planet. Even way back when everything was done by snail mail, we used to get letters to the editor that would come in. Usually there were people complaining about something that we wrote or photographed that was in the article. And thankfully, Kevin Ironton was there to temper my response to any reader mail, because usually I'd flame out against them. And he would either not publish it or he would just temper it back down. So he saved my butt more than once. And kept me from looking like a complete jerk. But meeting the opportunities that being associated with Fine Home Building and opening doors, particularly with live events with JLC Live, the International Builder Show, and lumberyard shows around the country that I've been invited to speak at, that's where I get to meet people. And now with social media, everything's really opened up. I'm corresponding with people on a daily basis. You know, people asking me questions, or people just saying, hey, you know, I got a different way of doing things. And they offer their suggestions on the posts I put up on social media. And then, of course, I take those and I spin them over to Chuck Miller, who isn't here tonight. He's been actually with the magazine longer than any of us, back to issue 1, currently as our tips and techniques editor. And, you know, always trying to show people, contractors and homeowners, the ideas that they have and thoughts that they have that they think are just throwaway ideas are really valuable to the rest of us in the industry. And this article over here is an example of that. Tim Holton, I met him at the Keep Craft Alive event. I think it was 3 years ago. And he had just written his first article for Fine Home Building. And I said, hey, what's going to be your next article? And he said, you know, I don't know. I don't think anything's worthy. So I had him describe a couple of projects that he had coming up. And he explained one of them, which was trying to figure out how to get the sheathing and seal it on the underside of the platform for this addition he was putting on. And being that when it was finished, it was only going to be about a foot above grade. So we brainstormed for a little while and came up with this idea. He went on and wrote an article about it. So, you know, for any of you out there that are listening tonight, you've got ideas that are just gold to other contractors. And I encourage you all to throw those ideas out to one of the editors. You know, you can just email into the Fine Home Building and somebody will follow up with you, and you never know where it'll turn. So, and by the way, my official title is editorial advisor, but it's a completely meaningless title because on only like 2 occasions in the last like 15 years have any of the editors ever asked me for my advice. And just as a reminder, I can usually bail some of you out on articles which are just like on just about to, you know, they're just too sketchy, or maybe add a little bit to it. So, you know, put me to use. It's free. You're not paying me anyway, and I don't expect to get paid. So it's just fun to be involved. So.
I'm sending you one in a little bit, Mike. It has your name all over it.
Thanks.
That is awesome.
I'll turn it back to you, Kylie. Thanks for
that was
thanks for
so
having
great,
me.
Mike. I think you wrapped up a lot of sentiments there. That's awesome. All right, Rob Yeagid, you're up.
All right, sounds good. Let's see, I'm drinking a Madonna double IPA from Zero Gravity up in Burlington, Vermont. Super delicious. You know, as I'm listening to people talk, I've got all these like pretty extraordinary memories of my time at the magazine. I had, you know, I've been at the magazine, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 years. And it was, I got there when I was young. I think I started as an assistant editor, maybe when I was 23 years old. And so not only was I on the fast track of, you know, my education in building best practices and building science, but I was absorbing the values that were in place at the time at Taunton and at magazine around business, around life, around work ethic. And really, when I think about that in a way personally from my time there, it's like, it's the values that were instilled in me by my coworkers, but it extended on into the Fine Homebuilding. I think that's one of the most special things about the brand itself is not only the people that work on the magazine, but the people who read it. There's this shared ideology around craft, detail, respect for the work, and respect for each other that has probably been one of the more influential things in my life. So much so that it inspired me to leave the magazine and do some other things in the conservation space. But yeah, so I think there's just a genuine gratitude that I have for all of my coworkers and then for the community itself. You know, it's kind of a surreal experience to be able to travel the country and to sit in the kitchens of builders and sit with designers, share a beer with them, talk about their lives, but then have like this unspoken bond that is like ever present. And it's very real today, despite social media and how the brand and the media has shifted and changed. But I still believe that it's like the core gem that is within this brand that everyone, I think, shares. And everything was carrying this legacy that we've all helped create. And while business has changed and media has changed and the landscape has changed, I see that just being strengthened. And I'm super fortunate to keep fueling that in any regard that I can with my work on Keep Craft Alive, which is really, I feel really fortunate to be able to do that work because I think it strikes right at the heart of the mission or the subtext of Fine Homebuilding, which is kind of empowering and bringing opportunity to the people who are passionate about building. So yeah, some basis. It's a powerful brand today as it has ever been. And I just appreciate all of you, both on the panel and those kind of tuning in.
All right. Justin.
Hello, everybody. I was at Taunton full-time from 2004 to 2020. So 16 years. I started like Brian did as an editorial intern, straight out of college. I knew nothing about building pretty much. Somehow managed to get in there and worked with back then, which was a big staff of people. And I learned underneath who I consider to be one of the best editors in the business, mentioned by Mike Guertin, who's Roe Osborne, now a contributor to the magazine. And of course, back then, Kevin Ireton was the leader of the pirate ship. And between the two of those guys and our then art director, Bob Goodfellow, who is the biggest star of this magazine, who's not here tonight and responsible for a ton of making it what it is today. I just learned a ton from these veterans. I really, Roe Osborne taught me how to think about an article, how to find a story in an everyday job site. how to efficiently pull it together and screed away all of the stuff that wasn't necessary and just get down to the meat of it, how to really be efficient and get a lot of stuff done. And of course, Kevin, who I personally always think to myself as never having said a single thing that he didn't exactly mean to say. He's just the most careful person with his words and lessons, and just being able to pass all that wisdom down, both building wisdom and editorial wisdom. So those are kind of my two grandfathers in this business. Three, I guess, with Bob in there. But anyway, so I eventually worked my way up through the ranks and did a lot of things with Taunton, from videos to podcasts to articles to eventually running Fine Homebuilding and Green Building Advisor, before realizing that I was outside of my comfort zone in terms of what I really enjoyed doing, and I eventually decided to leave and go focus on helping to save old houses. So that's what I do now. And my affiliation with Taunton is now on the other side of the fence, and I get to write for them instead of shaping everyone else's articles. And I got to tell you, it has been super humbling to realize how quickly you forget how to be an editor. Like, I sit down on my computer now after working out in the field, and I try and write an article, like a simple article that I just would have gone done, and I cannot get it out of my brain and onto the page anymore. I can't believe how fast that muscle has atrophied. So I now am super, super humbled and understanding of all the authors I've worked with who were struggling to get stuff done. So now I really feel like I've seen the full circle. So I don't know, maybe that will make me a better contributor going forward, I hope. But
Justin, you're one of the best writers I've ever come across. I don't buy it for a minute. You're just tired. You're just tired.
You should buy it.
Oh, that was awesome. All right, Jess, you're the newest amongst us, I think. And we're so happy that you're here. Jess actually plays a huge hand in getting the BS and Beer show out to all the different platforms every week. So she's their video. What's your most recent updated title, Jess? I can't keep track.
Hello. My recent title is Special Projects Editor. And like Justin and Brian, and I'm sure a bunch of other people, I started as an intern as well 4 years ago now, under Colin for video. So not editorial, but just video. And from there, I was hired part-time, then eventually full-time with Rob Wotzak for the web. And then I got pulled to the editorial team and helping out produce custom and sponsored content. So that's what I do now. So it's been a wild ride, and I know you can learn something new every day. I have very little building experience in the real world, but I learn 10, 20 plus new things every day. So it's been very fun, and I'm excited to be here tonight. So, and I apologize if you've ever gone on YouTube and seen a mistake on the exported version on YouTube. That's my bad, and always trying to make it better for the next week. So,
Jess, you do a wonderful job.
That's my spiel. I'll keep it short.
Very hardworking. Scott Gibson.
Hi. It's great to see all of you. Some of you I know pretty well, and some of you I don't, but I started at Taunton in 1992 at Fine Homebuilding, and I still write for Fine Homebuilding pretty much every day, or Green Building Advisor. So I've been working almost 30 years for, which I never would have believed possible, but panned out that way. It reminds me when years ago in some evening entertainment, Bob Goodfellow, the art director at the time, was talking about why people ended up at Taunton. And he was saying, it's like that movie with E.T., where the guy is stirring his mashed potatoes and he makes the mountains. Anybody remember that movie? You don't?
Yeah.
And
That's
Bob
close
says this-
encounters, Scott.
Close encounters, thank you. So what happened was that the mashed potatoes formed that, very iconic T, and, you knew you had to end up there. So I think it's been an amazing group of people that I've been very privileged to work with. Kevin in the beginning, and then a lot of you after that. I've been kind of blown away by the, as others have already mentioned, the commitment to good journalism. I mean, my background is in editing and reporting. I'm a reformed newspaper man. And I think that's been really important, that there's a place in the industry where people are really trying to get it right and are driven by the right things. I've done a lot of things at Taunton over the years, but I keep somehow winding up back at Fine Homebuilding. So I'm very happy for that. Oh, and tonight I'm drinking because, as Emily and others know, I mean, Maine's a very sophisticated place. So I'm drinking some box wine.
Scott. Oh, Scott is such an asset on GBA. I can't thank you enough for contributing on a very regular basis, daily, I'm sure. Kevin Ireton, a lot of people have mentioned you. Tell the audience who you are.
This is a little overwhelming. I will start with the important stuff. I am drinking what my good friend Chuck Miller refers to as a beer and a bump. The beer is a Two Roads double IPA, the Road to Ruin. And the bump is a shot of Knob Creek bourbon.
Nice.
Good choice.
He also sometimes referred to that as the Carpenter's Level. So it's hard to know what to say first. A couple of years ago, I was installing a porcelain pedestal sink at my house that I got at a flea market. And when I went to install the faucet holes weren't big enough. And I had to somehow figure out how to enlarge the faucet holes in a porcelain sink. And as so often happens, I was amazed at how long it took me to realize, oh, I'll just Google it. And of course, instantly, I came up with the YouTube video of someone showing how to use a Dremel tool with a diamond bit to enlarge the faucet holes. It's easy at this point to forget what it was like when we didn't have Google and YouTube and the internet. And just how desperate we all were for good information about how to do things. And how desperate we were for mentors. Like Andy, I started out working as a carpenter. And I did it because I loved the work, but I was surrounded by people who said things like, hey, slow down, you're getting paid by the hour. Or it's good enough for government work, and all kinds of cliches like that. And I started to think I was crazy until I discovered Fine Homebuilding, when I realized that there were other people who cared deeply about this work. And that's what drew me to the magazine. As it turned out, I was hired in 1986. At that time, right before then, I was on a roof in Maine in February, nailing on roof shingles, when I started to think, well, maybe I am wasting my college education. And maybe I might enjoy working at the magazine, because I had seen an ad in the magazine for a assistant editor. So I started in 1986, and I worked there for 23 years. And as I told Kylie in an email, I was the chief editor at the magazine for 17 years, a record that can only be explained by the Taunton Press's historically bad upper management. I think somebody just was not paying attention. But, honestly, at this point, every aspect of my life has been affected by my association with Fine Homebuilding. The friend, all of my best friends are either former employees at Taunton, current employees at Taunton, or authors that I met. We haven't talked as much about the builders and architects who write for the magazine. But, when we would go on the road and meet builders and architects around the country, I mean, you felt like you were meeting someone you'd known all your life, but meeting them for the first time. And that happened again and again and again. And I dare say that, everybody who's worked at the magazine has authors that they worked with that they're still in touch with on a regular basis. So it really is the community of people that has made this magazine, what it is. And now that whole experience is moving online, but it's still a community of people who care deeply about what they do. And that part remains unchanged. And I just feel honored to have ever been a part of it. Travis was talking about, how grateful he is to the magazine. But the editors, as editor of the magazine, we were always humbled and grateful to the builders and architects who are willing to contribute their knowledge and take time out of their busy schedules, to share their information. That's what made it all work. So, I'm humbled by people like Travis, and that's the way it's always been. That's it for me. That's all I got.
Amen. I feel the same way. I totally get where you're coming from. I like that. Brian.
Thanks, Kylie. Hey, everyone. So many important themes have been already expressed from the group, and which is really nice, because it just affirms what's so true about, and not only so true about like working at Fine Homebuilding and what the experience has been like working at Fine Homebuilding, but what a great community we are part of. Maybe sometimes we're at, maybe sometimes we've been at the center of that community, especially before things became digital and where there was a magazine that was sort of the only thing we had. Maybe we were more the hub of the community at that point, but really now what I see is just that the community of caring building professionals is so strong, and it's apparent in right here, right? BS and Beer. It's apparent that in Fine Homebuilding Magazine still being in print. It's apparent on Instagram. So pretty much all these media has exploded, and all these media forms are just kind of taking that letting that community continue to thrive. So yeah, I don't know who Kylie mentioned getting teary. I feel like I am getting a little teary just thinking about this. So just to be a little bit more of an introduction, I've been at the magazine, in and out of the magazine a couple of times, but basically there for almost 20 years now. A few people have mentioned I started as an intern with just enough job site experience, just enough newspaper experience, and almost a degree, which I think is why, Andy was maybe smart enough to hire me a few months after my internship ended, and he hired me as an editorial assistant, which I don't think, and I may be wrong with this, but I don't think that they had before. And I don't think that Andy necessarily knew what to do with me. So he'd throw some work my way, but I kind of had to look around and figure out what this job was. And so I just sort of started imitating what the other editors were doing. And, knowing that I was working with, Andy and Kevin and Chuck and these just sort of whip smart editors who knew, light years more than me about every aspect of the job, but I knew that, it was sink or swim situation. So I started bringing in article ideas that were, articles that I knew I could produce. So I had worked for a while in landscape construction, and I worked with I had a really excellent boss and landscaper for a while. And so I brought Kevin an idea for an article on how to install a lawn. And, Kevin was immediately appalled about, putting a story about how to install a lawn in Fine Homebuilding Magazine. But I kept going back into his office, and I convinced him that this is something a builder should know. I think I might even shown him photos of like burnt up lawns that were installed wrong. And so finally Kevin said, okay, go ahead, do this. And I believe that was the first feature that I got in the magazine as an editorial assistant. And at that point, again, Kevin was like, well, now we have to make you an assistant editor. And so that was sort of how it all started for me. And from there, everything that I have learned and everything that I have done is all only because of only because of the kindness of everyone on this screen, and maybe many people listening, and all of our authors, because I came in with pretty little building knowledge and maybe even less passion about the subject matter. I mean, I was looking for a job at the time. My passion really grew on the job. And because I was able to work with passionate, caring, smart people who were also patient with me, I a legitimate passion for architecture and building, emerged along the way. And I feel like the more I learn, the more passionate I've become about this work. And last thing I'll say is that we've been interviewing for a new position at the magazine or on our website over the past couple of weeks, and a few of the people, and we're looking. So it's an entry level position, so we have some young people who don't really know the brand too well interviewing, and clearly they're spending some time looking at the website and maybe picking up an issue of the magazine. I'm not sure, but what's been interesting is that a few of them noted how important this content was, and they noted it in a number of different ways, from all the different ways that housing impacts people's lives. And so that was kind of a sign that over these 40 years we've done something right. So thanks to everyone here and everyone listening.
Brian, I feel like so many of those words that came out of your mouth could have come out of my own mouth. I really appreciate what you just shared, including the burnt lawn. I've been responsible for a few of those too. Let's see, who else is left? Okay, we've got Colin, Patrick, and Peter. So Colin, what can you share with us?
Well, 9 years ago, Brian Pontolilo invited me to the Fine Homebuilding team. So I've been there 9 years producing videos. And I've worked with many of the people on the screen here. To set the record straight, in case you didn't recognize, I'm not drinking, I'm pounding Bud Light because I know what I like and I'm not ashamed. Fine homebuilding means kind of two different things to me. One, as a video maker and a content producer, it's extremely fulfilling. Working with caring people who know what they're doing, who I look up to, makes my job easy. I love going on the road. The other side of it is that I was a builder. Well, I was a carpenter early in my career, and that's actually what I did to pay to go to film school. I was a working carpenter going to film school. And many years later, when my career shifted and I came to Fine Homebuilding, and I learned about air sealing and flashing, I realized that a couple projects I did may be in trouble. So I continually every once in a while, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, remembering something I did wrong. Luckily, a lot of the things I did wrong were on my own project, so I can repair my rotting house, rotting doors, unflashed windows, but my houses are leaky and they burn a lot of energy. So Fine Homebuilding is a great place for me. And I don't really know that I have much to share beyond that. I'd say thank you, Mrs. Speaker. I'd like to allot my time to Travis Brinkart.
We need to, yeah, that's true. We need to include Travis. I mean, you gave some announcements, but you're a builder who's been reading the magazine for so long. So yeah, absolutely. What would you share here?
Oh, well, I don't want to get all mushy. I've already gone back and forth from laughter to tears a few times in this, and I'm just a reader. I'm not, I'm not part of this crew the way most of you folks are. But I will take just a second. Since
you're also a contributor.
That's right. I'm trying to pay back what was paid forward to me so many years ago. I've made a couple of comments in Instagram and in the chat that are very heartfelt and sincere. I really do owe my career in no small part to this magazine, because the amount of confidence that this publication gave me to try to build things that I had not built before, because you guys told me how to do it, the opportunities that I seized because of what I learned in these pages from experts. I wouldn't be where I'm at without this magazine, and I am so grateful to the magazine. But as Colin mentioned, that videos, I was thinking about the videos and the podcast. I don't want to lose sight of that either. I know the magazine's 40 years old, but one of the things that everyone that's talking has to keep in mind is that you guys have stepped it up every time there's a new way to share the knowledge, to connect, to build the community. You've seized that and you've done it so gracefully and effectively. I can't say enough great things about Fine Home Building, and so I'll shut up so that people that need to talk can. But thank you all very much, and thank you for the extra time, Colin.
Well, Fine Home Building would be nothing if not for readers, so I think that's very valuable. Patrick, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I've been scared this whole time, Kylie, that you're going to call on me. I felt like I was a high school student who hadn't done his homework.
Oh, Pisha.
I think Michael started off with the right sentiment for me. It's an honor to work for this brand and people who are so smart and they care so much about home building. And I know all of you would agree with me when I say it's important work. It's people's wealth. It's their shelter. We know what happens when you don't have heat now, right? These are important things. And the legacy of the brand of quality and beauty and function continues. And it's a beautiful thing started by people way smarter than me. And I still sometimes feel like I am not worthy to be affiliated even with this company, but it is such a pleasure and so fulfilling to do it. It would be hard for me to imagine a better job. And the people that I get to work with on the contributors end and my colleagues, they're smart, kind people who have this community of home building, and it is so inspiring to be around them. And I just feel so lucky. And I think we're all lucky that the Romans had some smarts to start this thing that has changed so many people's lives and have elevated home building in this country.
Patrick, I have always really admired your dedication to the podcast. I feel like you have moved us. You were the forerunner of moving us into the digital age, and you do such a beautiful job with that. And every week you impart really great information in a really fun and approachable way. And I know you've got your fans out there, so I'm so happy you're here tonight.
Thanks, Kylie. And the podcast was not my creation, but I do love it, and it is really enjoyable for me to be part of that.
I remember you skipping down the hall on recording days. Oh, last but not least, Peter Chapman.
Thank you, Kylie. Well, I interviewed for a job at Fine Homebuilding in, I think it was 1988 or 1989. And I would love to say that a short-haired Kevin Ironton was my interviewer, but I think that was, I think Mark Fire was at the helm then. So that goes back a bit. But needless to say, I didn't get the job, which was probably a good thing for everyone. But I did get a job about a year later working for the Taunton Books Department. And that's sort of where I've lived for the last 35 years or so. And looking across the screen here, quite a few of you I've worked with, as editors, and I see Mike Guertin as authors. And indeed, the current book I'm working on is with Emily and with Michael, and also with Dan and Chris, who aren't here, which is going to come out in spring 2022. And it's a book called The Pretty Good House, which is near and dear to a lot of you here. And I know it's been, people have been talking about having that book come out for, I don't know, maybe 6, 8, 10 years now. So it's finally going to see the light of day. Talking about coming full circle, as Justin did, since lockdown, I've been dragged back into the fine home building kind of environment. And I'm now, I have to look this up because I can't remember. I'm now the content curation director for Fine Home Building website, working on various project guides, which some of you may have seen. But which is interesting. So in having failed to get the job initially, now I'm found myself back with Fine Home Building, which is fun. And I'm drinking the same as Kevin, the Road to Ruin, which seems very appropriate. And I don't know, I seem to have many things in common with Kevin, having worked with him many years. Also, for some strange reason, I bought a house back in 87 from Tim Schneider, who used to work at Fine Woodworking. He worked at Home Building. He worked at Fine Woodworking, but Kevin worked on this house. And there's many times I explore things in this house, and I think, what the hell did he do here? And I'm still finding things now, but it's great to have this connection with Kevin from many years, and it's great to have the connection with all of you. And I'm glad to be in the Fine Home Building clan now. So thank you.
That is exciting. That book is coming to fruition. I think everybody who knows about it is excited about it, and I'm glad that we're finally able to discuss it openly. So one of the things that we talked about having happen tonight is giving some thought to the way the industry itself has changed over the last 4 decades. And we can get into that conversation. I know that Mason, before we do that, I kind of got ahead of myself there for a minute. Mason wanted to share a presentation that he put together to represent, his feelings about Fine Home Building. Mason, did you want to say anything about yourself to start before you get into that, though?
Probably not.
Well, let's at least tell people that you're the owner of Hudson Valley Preservation. I guess that came up earlier, but we want to recognize that. And the founder of the Connecticut chapter of Building BS and Beer. So we had one meeting and then COVID hit. So we'll pick it back up at some point. But
well, Kylie, you're going to have to give me permission to share. But what I'll say is that I learned from Kevin about the carpenter's level. So I'm drinking a hootie from 6 Point Brewery in Brooklyn and a little Bullet Rye. So Kevin, thank you for your giving me that great level and everything. So.
Okay, I promoted you, should be able to share now, Mason.
Well, I have gone, as I prepared this, I've gone between the tears and the wondering if I was going to be sucking up too much and people would get nauseous, but it's pretty clear that people aren't going to be nauseous because there's been a lot of sucking up. But in case you're wondering why, I'm the only person in this group that has not been paid by Fine Homebuilding Magazine or the Taunton Press. But the reason that I made the pitch to the Brew Crew is because this is also my 40th anniversary. I graduated from college in May of 1981 and immediately went into the trades as a full-time carpenter. And also, I'm very lucky to be living in the same neck of the woods as Taunton Press. And I've gotten to know a lot of these guys through the days, and that's been just wonderful. So here is my tribute to the 40th anniversary of Fine Home Building. And let's start with the name, Fine Home Building. Fine means excellence, outstanding, first class. In today's world, that would be considered great branding. It certainly sucked me in. It's a magazine by builders who exemplified excellence. And they took that excellence and then they stretched themselves by becoming writers and photographers. I looked up to these builders and writers, and they became my heroes. And, we all had heroes probably growing up. And I remember I had heroes, and a lot of them were professional athletes, and I would meet some of these heroes, and they were really disappointing. But as I've gotten to meet the different fine home building people, I realized that they're fine people. And the Romans did something when they started this magazine to just create a culture of attracting some of the best people that I know. So I'm not going to talk about the trigger warning about being, if you want to hear me suck up to these people, because you got it, they're my heroes. So what is now? In today's world, we have compound miter saws that can cut on a compound angle 64th of a degree, 64th of an inch to nothing. We have framing with nail guns, and in the latest issue of Fine Home Building, there are now nail guns that don't have hoses, and drill drivers that can drive screws, 10-inch screws into hardwood. And one thing I'll say about these three articles, two by Rick Arnold and one by Mike Guertin, and the last one on the right by Patrick. Patrick, you have the best title for your review there. I mean, black is the new teal. That's just awesome. Look at the other ones over there. Framing with nail guns and compound miter saw review. I mean, that's really straightforward, but the creativity there is wonderful. So that's what we have today. When I started, this is what we used. I really used a miter box like that. And you had to clean up your cut if you were a little off with a block plane. That hammer in the middle, I bought in 1981. It's a plumb 16-ounce hammer. I still regret to today that I did not get a straight claw instead of the curved claw. It would have been much more useful, but I love the hammer. And then the Yankee screwdriver on the right. I mean, when you had to drive a lot of screws, that's what you would attempt to use to drive all of those screws. And I think that I am a typical Fine Home Building subscriber. The people that subscribe, whether they're 62 like I am now or 22 when I started, there's a certain level of intimidation in that the people who want to be the best have to stretch themselves, and you can't just plod along doing things the way you wanted to. So the magazine became a level of accountability for becoming better at our trade, learning more, to become the best. Now, I think most people can recognize this silhouette that are around Fine Home Building. So I think this was like 2006 or 2007, and I was in a yoga class. And in our area, mostly women are in yoga classes, but there happened to be another guy in the yoga class. And so I think I probably looked at the sign-in sheet and I saw Kevin Ironton. I'm like, I know that name. I can't place it, but I figured it out, and it was Kevin Ironton. He's the senior editor of Fine Home Building Magazine. So I was like, I got to meet this guy. He's one of my heroes. So over the years, Kevin and I have become good friends, and Kevin has worked on a number of our projects, some really big projects. And I was talking to my business partner, Dave Seegers, today, and saying, what was it about Kevin's humor that we just, we couldn't decide whether it helped our productivity or hurt the productivity. But it was always great to have Kevin on the job, and we were trying to remember some of the Kevinisms. He said a couple earlier, We couldn't think of them. So if we have time, Kevin, I want to hear some of the very dry, subtle, maybe things you heard along the way that weren't necessarily, along the lines of, well, it's government work, it's doesn't matter because it's just good for government work. You're probably not going to recognize this guy here because he has hair. But that's Rob Wotzak. And Rob came aboard, as he mentioned, pretty early on in his carpentry career, but fairly early in Hudson Valley preservation. And one thing about Rob is he didn't have maybe a lot of skills and knowledge, but he quickly gained skills and knowledge. And we had a pretty ragtag crew of carpenters at that time. And Rob has moved, look where he is today, moving into the, he's another hero of mine. In 2015, I met Andy Engel, and at some point in time, he suggested that we do an article together. And as you can see in the down below, it says Martin Holliday, and I'm pretty sure that Martin Holliday is a hero for every person on this panel here. But it was a great thrill to have Andy approach us to do this article. And one thing I remember about Andy is he had a great camera and he really knew how to use it. And one of the things that I think is so great about Fine Home Building are the way the articles are put together. And here are a couple of articles by Andy. And the graphics are always so clear that I know Travis, this is something that helped you looking at these graphics. And then the article on epoxy consolidation. That article could have just been the drilling holes into the column, and that would have been good enough for a whole lot of people. But they explain about wood and the reason why things happen and when you should use it and when you shouldn't. Just really, really good stuff. And so then, I don't know, for some of you younger people, you might know, but this was a song by Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show about being on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. But my company got onto the cover of Fine Home Building, and it was a thrill. I got to meet Justin. Matt Milham was the photographer. I hung out that day that they were there taking the pictures, and it was just so much fun. And, I was starstruck. It was just really great. One thing I would suggest people do is go back, if you're a subscriber online, look up this article by Scott Gibson, the 25th anniversary issue. There's a lot of good history about the magazine. And it's well worth the read. So the magazine has gone from being a magazine to having videos to the trade shows. And now we have the podcast. And I listen to the podcast every Friday morning, driving to work, and I find myself laughing out loud. I can't figure out how these guys keep it so entertaining on topics that just take such a great range from big things to little things. It's really great. And the other parts of the well, actually, I'll go back. Last week, they were talking about the International Builder Show. And Brian Euler, who is one of the owners of Pioneer Builders out in the state of Washington, brought up how there's 3 kinds of builders, and they're all firemen. And he described the difference between each fireman builder. And I'm not going to tell you what he said. You have to go back and listen to this podcast because it was pure gold. And I hope somebody can put that link up into the chat box so that people can listen to that episode. But the other thing is, with the podcast, we're getting to have a much more inclusive look at people in the industry. There's race, gender, and ethnicity that, we have to admit, as we're on this group, there's a whole lot of old white guys like me on here. And the podcast is allowing that to expand. So I'm going to let the guys just have fun for the rest of 20 minutes of time.
Thank you, Mason. I just love the fact that you came up with this idea and you spent the time on that. And I know what you mean about heroes, and I think that's a really nice way to put it all together. I'm sure it's appreciated by a lot of people. So I don't want to spend any time. I feel like there's so many people here that could spend lots of time saying lots of interesting things in regards to celebrating this magazine. So I just reached out to the folks that have been monitoring the chat box. Are there any questions that we should engage with? Or should I just open the floor to people who would like to comment on the industry and how it's changed and how the magazine has kept pace with it?
Yeah, I think no pressing questions. I've lost my screen. There it is. No, just support and appreciation for everybody, I think is the gist. I think it's more than a magazine to a lot of readers, including me, and just I think everybody's appreciative. One of our sort of ideas for topics is what has changed in 40 years. Obviously, there's a few things, and then how will things continue changing going forward. But maybe if anybody has any suggestions on or any stories about what's a major shift in the last 40 years since the magazine has changed. Scott's got his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happened with newspapers like the New York Times, the Post, and all the big papers are going digital. They're giving up their print versions. So if we look forward, I've personally done a lot more work in the last 5 or 10 years on the web and find it pretty great. So what is going to happen to the print version of home building in 5 or 10 years? I wonder about that.
Justin and Rob are telepathing to me that they got out of the magazine business.
That's a question for Brian, really.
Yeah.
And what are you gonna do?
I don't think we're gonna do anything. I think that in the world.
Attaboy.
Yeah, we're just gonna take slowly crash and burn.
Down with the ship.
No, I think that print has certainly struggled as a medium, and it continues to, and probably will continue to. But I also think that we'll see a point where that, and I think we actually have seen it and are starting to see some growth in our print product for the first time in a long time at Fine Homebuilding. And I think it's because when you do something well and when you continue to do well and continue to put the effort into it, there's going to be an audience for it. And if that audience gets smaller, it gets smaller. And, one of the things that I said to my boss recently about when she asked me about my thoughts on print, I said, it needs to get better and more expensive. And that's how I feel about it. Like make it even better than it's ever been and charge what we need to charge for it. And there'll be people who want that, especially with an important topic like this.
That's a good answer.
100% agree.
I think there's some interest in some anecdotal stories. Somebody mentioned the worst photo shoot ever. Can anybody speak to that?
The best thing we could do here is really just let Kevin tell a story about something.
Yeah, right. I think people want
hear from Kevin.
He's the best storyteller here.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to leave Scott to tell the worst photo shoot story because he's got one of them. But there's a couple of things I want to say. One is Brian mentioned how appalled I was when he first pitched a story about planting grass in the magazine, planting a lawn. And I was appalled, but I think that maybe I was more appalled when Mike Guertin wanted to do a story about installing vinyl siding. That was maybe the most controversial article we've ever published. His point was, you install what the customer wants you to install. It's not always your choice. And a lot of Fine Home Buildings readers have to install vinyl siding. He said, we might as well show them how to do it the right way. And as was obnoxiously the case with Mike so often, he was absolutely right. But we did get a lot of hate mail after publishing that.
It took you 3 years to finally agree, and you still never took me up on the idea of remodeling a mobile home. So,
ooh, ouch.
I want to tell one other quick story because the subject of the 25th anniversary of Fine Home Building came up. And I went back a few hours ago and reread Scott's article about the history of the magazine. And it was a great, great article that included just a lot of good anecdotes. But what it reminded me of was something that I had completely forgotten, which was that at the time of Fine Home Building's 25th anniversary, Chuck Miller and I had this idea that we would, I don't know if you've seen them, but they have these like giant cutouts of cartoon characters that people get, and they're set out in front of somebody's mailbox, like when somebody turns 40 years old. And it's, so it's Mickey Mouse saying, Lordy, Lordy, Jennifer is 40. And they appear and I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if we got one of those for Fine Home Building's 25th anniversary? So our secretary at the time, Maureen Friedman, we relied on her for everything. And so she made arrangements and she wanted to know what character we wanted. And Chuck and I, without even consulting each other, both agreed it had to be Jessica Rabbit. And for those of you who don't know the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it was a combination of animation and live action, but one of the main characters was this femme fatale seductress, Jennifer Rabbit, who was this sultry redhead in a low-cut dress. And so we decided we wanted Jessica Rabbit out in front of Fine Home Building's Taunton Press's main entry with a sign that said, sakes alive, Fine Home Building is 25. So without consulting anybody, we made arrangements, and the sign appeared at 6 o'clock, the morning of our 25th anniversary. And before the day was out, I got a call from the human resources director at the company because somebody had already complained about the sign. And it turns out it was somebody that was in charge of marketing of the magazine at the time who felt that it was not, and I quote, on message for the brand.
So totally on message for the brand.
I couldn't agree more. And then the human resources director wanted to know, well, couldn't we change it to Bob the Builder? And I just said, no, I'll have it removed. I never admitted that I had paid for it, which I had. But by the next day, it was gone. It was a short-lived episode in Fine Home Building's history, but it's one I want you all to remember.
That's great. Anybody want to comment on maybe? Well, actually, somebody mentioned in the chat box the idea of great articles that never got published. I don't know if anybody can speak to that. I feel like Justin might be able to.
I'm not sure about great articles, but can I tell you my all-time favorite article title?
Please.
So back in about 2000, probably, we did an article. Steve Culpepper, who was also known as Maya Culpepper, did an article comparing toilets, and the working title through the editorial process was or the working deck was something like a head-to-head comparison for our readers with nothing to go on. And it stayed and it stayed. And when we finally got to the last iteration before it went to the printer, I think Kevin probably just said, "Oh, what the hell, let's run it." And I think that was the best, most humorous deck we've ever run. Thought you might enjoy that.
I remember that article.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun when creativity is allowed. I feel like that's the difference between print and digital. Digital is so keyword centric. It's sometimes difficult to get clever and still meet those demands. The magazine has a place forever for that. One of many reasons, but that's one of them. You have more room to sort of, do that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and as much as Travis is going to hate me for saying this, I no longer own a single print issue of Fine Homebuilding. I know. Oh, I see that face, Travis. But whenever I ask Mike Maines for a resource on something, he sends me the digital link to the Fine Homebuilding article that I need. And that is a really valuable resource to homeowners because people ask us for stuff all the time. And I did rip a article out of a magazine for a colleague for something the other day, and I ripped out 5 pages and gave it to someone. And so from the net zero environmental perspective of people sending me stuff, but I would share them. So Travis, when you said Mike recycled them, maybe he gave them to someone else, because there was a post on Instagram about somebody who gave away their entire Fine Homebuilding collection, and all they had to do was go and pick it up, and they read through all of them. So that's decent. But
I think you're overlooking the hydric buffer capacity of a shelf full of magazines and how important that is to an energy efficient house, Emily.
Smaller square footage means you don't get to hang on to quite as many things. So we recycle them to our neighbors. We share our reading materials.
Kevin mentioned that Scott had a good worst photo shoot story. I'm curious about that, Scott.
Well, I actually had more than one, as Kevin probably knows. I think the one he's probably thinking of was one of the first out-of-town shoots I had. I went up to this cabin in Wisconsin or Minnesota, someplace up that way. And this architect, Arthur, had arranged for us to have access to these very cool historical cabins that were designed by, I can't remember who, but. So back in those days, we had Polaroid film that you would set up your shot with film, and you'd take a couple Polaroids to make sure the lighting was okay. So I shot my Polaroids as I'd been instructed to do, and I laid the film down someplace and went about my business. And about an hour later, I went back and said, "Oh shit, I forgot to pick that up." So I picked up the Polaroid thing and had peeled off this chunk of finish off of an historical side table in this beautiful Wisconsin table that, had not been difficult, if not had been easy to get access to. And I said to the author, I said, "Oh my God, I've ruined this table." And he said, "No, that's okay. We can have it refinished. We'll take it out. We'll take it down to wherever and get it redone, and the owners will never know." So explaining that expense on my expense report was complicated, but ultimately successful.
On a related note, I'm curious if Colin has a worst video shoot story, and I wonder if it's the first one I did with Colin, which was also with Justin and Rob, I believe was head editor at the time, where we spent a week trying to make me into a Bob Vila, and it was just it was.
Did that video ever come out?
I never saw it. Like we had, Colin and I'm forgetting your buddy's name who was second video or second camera, but just get the stuttering guy who has stage fright to spend a week teaching you how to build cabinets. Like, what was there a worse experience than that one, or is that
that experience was actually fine as long as you didn't have to face it in the edit room.
Yeah.
But it really had nothing to do with you, Mike. That actually, we have all that media and that could be cut together. It was just so massive. We shot for like 8 hours a day straight, 2 cameras for 5 days. So we had 40
I also
hours.
have that island you built, Mike. That's in my shop. That's my work table.
Yeah.
That's the island. That's the video, was making the island. Yeah. No, that was not a bad experience, Mike.
Okay.
Colin and I had what I would describe as one of my worst experiences of my entire life, and that includes my dad dying and sister-in-law dying. But we were on a video shoot trying to document an egress window being installed in a basement. And it's one of those experiences where you say, well, absolutely nothing else can go wrong. And then 4 hours later, things keep going wrong for the entire duration. And oh my God, that was a tough one. And Rob Yagid took a couple difficult phone calls regarding that shoot. And I would never want to relive that. It brings back very traumatic memories just talking about it right now.
Yeah, there were sewer lines and gas lines involved.
Oh
yes,
God.
They dug before. What's the expression? Call before you dig.
One call. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't call. They just dug. They first broke the gas line. We resolved that. Then they broke
sewer line.
The sewer line. So
they dug
every time
up the
someone flushed
downspout.
Yes.
The roof water pipes in the.
So at that point, we said nothing else can happen, and then we heard a mason gas saw being fired up, and all of a sudden, all the alarms, the CO2 alarms, etc., went off in the house, and we went inside, and the guys were operating in a closed space, the gas saw, and the house was filling up with blue smoke, and they didn't want to stop, and we forced them to.
And they were keeping the dust down by like watering the basement paneling.
That's the only job I ever walked off of. Like I said, both of us said, let's just walk out of here. We packed up our stuff and just drove away because it was too scary.
That's not true. I had to deal with the
Oh, sorry, I left.
You left.
I have my standards.
Well, we're coming up on 7:25. We're supposed to wrap up at 7:30, and I don't know if anybody wants to share. Usually we go around and ask everybody for a last thought, and I suppose we could try to do that. It might take longer than we have, but any closing thoughts maybe from the other editorial staff?
I was going to say, here's your last 5 seconds. Last 5 seconds clip. Go, Kylie.
Oh, you mean everybody just as a 5-second clip? All right. Thank you, Justin and Brian, for giving me this opportunity. You are cherished people, and this company is something super special. And I hope to be at it to my dying day. May that be long from now. That's what I have to say.
My last little thoughts here real quick are, and I don't want to make this like an Oscar speech, like thanking people that didn't get to come up on the stage. But I mean, there's so many people, mainly the art department and all of our illustrators who are not here
Bill
tonight.
Godfrey.
They were invited. I would like to mention that a number of these people who have come
Bill
up.
Godfrey.
Mm-hmm.
There's a person in the background of Fine Homebuilding that nobody ever has heard of named Bill Godfrey. And he makes every photo in the magazine look amazing. Even though they sent a bunch of builders and amateurs out to take those photos, he removes stuff from photos that shouldn't have been there. He fixes mistakes. He is amazing. And he is like if he ever left, we just shut the doors.
He's an artist, right? And gets no acknowledgement often in what we do.
Bill Godfrey put hard hats on guys on a crew on an article I did about working with a crane. And the idiot editors out there with the camera not insisting on hard hats with overhead loads, Bill took care of it. So
he's digitally tucked in my shirt. He's added safety glasses. He's removed labels. we've never been able to successfully lengthen Mike's shorts, but we're still working on that.
Okay, here's my Bill Godfrey story. I am a carpenter who's lost a fingertip. I did that at age 30 up in Maine on a table saw, and so job site safety is very important to me, and I kind of wear that missing fingertip as a badge of honor, although it really marks my idiocy. We've all done stupid things. I was just unlucky enough to do a stupid thing at the wrong time. Anyway, when I learned that at Fine Woodworking, whenever an author appeared in photos with a missing fingertip, Bill's job was to add to the fingertip back. I was horrified, and I insisted to Bill that if ever anybody appeared in Fine Homebuilding, including myself, and was missing a fingertip, it had to appear that way, because I feel like it is an important message to send that you have to be careful out there. But Bill's a great guy, and he did as instructed.
He also takes out ticky-tacky furnishings. The house might be nice, but he's good with the design department stuff too. That was a good tribute.
And once again, like a super kind and conscientious person. Like you could drop one of these weird things in Bill's lap and he would never get visibly flustered. He's probably losing his mind on the inside, but he's never going to give you a hard time about it.
Well, Patrick, on that note, one thing is, sometimes I feel like this is the hardest job I've ever had in my life, but it's also been the most fulfilling job I've had in my life. And it's a lot of it has to do with, it's like this creative group of people, both inside the company and the contributors we work with, make it so much easier and more satisfying and make you feel like you're just really doing something that matters. And it makes everything worth it.
That's well put.
That's a nice closing note, Rob. Here we are at 7:30, so maybe we'll leave it there. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time. And if the audience members want to contribute any Fine Home Building stories to Kylie's GBA post when she puts this up, go ahead and continue with your lovely stories about how the magazine has inspired you over the last 40 years, because I think this was a great tribute tonight. So thank you all for joining us.
Good idea. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.